It's garbage picking time. Now, don't any of you get any wise ideas. I'm looking at you particularly, big guy.
Me? Get a load of this guy.
Sir.
For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Well, that was a bit of a different intro, and you know what, surprisingly, this is actually different, though you probably wouldn't know it at first glance, seeing as how this thing's been the same for, what, 15 years now?
Yeah, and I will say though that I absolutely love the way this looks, because I think it was really smart to use a retro design in the first place, because here we are 15 years later and it still looks really cool, and I think it's going to age really, really well, which means I think it'll be a future classic.
Now, in fairness, there was an update in 2015, I think, though it was mostly the interior that was changed. And it looks the same as it did back in 2015.
Yeah, so what's the difference between this and like every other SRT Hellcat out there?
Well, here's the thing. It can only be built on the, let me get this right, Challenger SRT Hellcat Red Eye Wide Body Jailbreak.
That's the name of the whole thing?
Yeah. I used to think like Jaguar Land Rover was really bad for these long names,
Yeah.
especially with the Range Rover models, but this is just ridiculous. But
it's a ridiculous car, so it makes sense.
Absolutely. And looking past that, yeah, it can only be built on that Red Eye version of the Hellcat and the wide body in particular. And then the other thing it does is the Jailbreak name, well, as silly as it is and as much fun as we had with it, what it means is that Dodge has just unlocked all kinds of color combos and options packages that you can add. There's no restrictions on that, which has its pros and its cons, because I'd have to say there's a lot of people out there with more money than taste. So just opening up the order books to whatever you want your car to look like, kind of a risky proposition.
Although I do think it's really cool that Dodge gives you all these options for personalization. I think because it helps keep it interesting, 15 years later. How can we make this car more exciting? Let's give it more colors. Let's give it more trims.
Yeah, I get that, but here's my thing. I said to you earlier, there is something about brand identity and that kind of protection that Dodge loses by doing that. Because yes, it's your car, but there are certain kind of parameters that it wants to maintain, because if you order an orange car with red seats and yellow brake calipers, that's kind of silly, doesn't look great, and it really does tarnish the brand just a little bit for everyone else.
Right.
You might like the way it looks, but it doesn't necessarily reflect well on the brand to allow you to order your car that way.
That's true, but I do like the freedom, just in case you want to go there to like express your personality. But yeah, this car is wild, so why not go all out with it, right?
Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, then the irony of it is that for as wild as this car is, this one we're in, kind of understated, though I do tip my cap to whoever it was at Stellantis who ordered this one in particular. I think they did a really nice job. That kind of semi-gloss gray paint, the black stripes, black wheels, that spoiler, the splitter, and then just that little kiss of blue with the brake calipers. Really nice touch. And then in here, this gray and black leather upholstery and the gray seat belts exclusive to this Jailbreak package. Really nice look.
Yeah, and I kind of like how they have this cool Jailbreak badge on here, on the dash, but I do wish there was like a little bit more about the interior that made it feel worth the asking price. Because like you said earlier, like, oh, this looks like a $50,000 car until you start it up, obviously. But like, I think they could have done a bit more in here to make it pop.
Totally, and just overall, I've always said that about these Hellcat powered models, that in here, there's not much. So you've got some embossed seats here. That's about it. That jailbreak badge on that vent. Other than that, there's nothing that really sets this apart from the rest of the Challenger lineup. And let's not forget, this one we're driving, it's like $126,000 before tax.
Oh my God.
And the thing for me, this is just a license to print money, right?
Yeah, they've been doing it for, like we said, 15 years.
There's just, it owes the brand nothing.
Yeah.
And even still, this platform dates back to like the mid-90s. It's really one of those things where, you know, the fact that people are still buying these, I'm sure some executives are laughing at the fact, as cool as they are, that it's like, man, we didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool though, because like this level of coolness that this car just like exudes all the time is so hard to find these days. And this car has so much personality and it really leans into its craziness, which I really love.
Yeah, that's fair. And speaking of craziness, we should talk about the powertrain. Now, this thing is rear-wheel drive only. It's also automatic only, but that's because it's paired with the high output version of the Hellcat V8, which is hilarious to me because any Hellcat V8 is high output in my mind. It makes like 707 horsepower and 656 pound-feet of torque. And then when you go with the high output version, that jumps to like 797 horsepower and 707 pound-feet of torque. But then with this jailbreak package, you get 807 horsepower and 707 pound-feet of torque.
I can't believe you just kept going higher and higher. I was like, when is it gonna end?
And it's also crazy because you can actually you can restrict the power in this, right? To 500 horsepower.
That's the restricted version because that's not enough.
Just insane. Like, this thing is silly for the sake of it. I drove that Cadillac CT5V Blackwing. Very special car. And I talked about it in relation to these, especially the Charger sedan, and how different they are despite using the same recipes. This one is just silly, whereas that one is also very precise.
Right. And I think you mentioned before that like the Challenger has not always been super well known for handling.
No.
But this one's different.
Yes. Yeah, what I find really interesting about this, the wider track of the wide body, as well as these massively wide tires. These are 305s front and back, which is ridiculous. But it really does lend to a sense of kind of stability and cornering ability that you usually don't get. That's always been the big knock on these Hellcat powered cars, right? Is that they can go in a straight line, but anything beyond that is really dicey. But this one, like, no, it's not a sports car, but it's not a school bus either. And that's what I like about it.
Yeah, and honestly, this car is so extra. Like, every time today where you've just given it, it just makes...
Like that?
It just makes me laugh every single time. And it's honestly so addictive because that experience, it like really triggers all of your senses. Like, you're hearing the whine of the supercharger, you're feeling those wheels struggling to get traction. It's just hilarious.
But something else I really like is that this car is very user-friendly. It's easy to drive. Now, I do want to also add that qualifier that it can get away from you very quickly. You do have to be careful, but my point is that you can kind of predict what it's going to do once you get to know it. So, you know, the rear end is going to step out when you really get on the gas, but you can kind of tell which way it's going to step out. Just everything is the same thing. If you are heading into a corner a little hot, you can kind of predict how it's going to plow to the outside and what's going to happen when you give it a little bit of throttle to help rotate it. One thing that I noticed driving out to this shoot today actually was that those wide tires, those contact patches are so huge. And so on the 401 where they're repaving and so some of the lanes are a little bit lower than the other ones, as soon as you ride up onto that, it like pulls you up for that split second. It almost feels like you aren't in control of the car. And I've never experienced that before. It is a little bit unnerving in a weird way because it's just like, you know, if you're driving on that kind of knurled pavement where they're repaving and you can almost like there's play in the steering wheel because the tires don't have proper traction. Mm-hmm. In a similar way, that's what this feels like over those kind of changes in pavement.
Right. I mean, hopefully no one has to experience that. But again, it's just a reminder that you got to be kind of careful with stuff like this.
Yes, absolutely. And it was just an interesting experience,
Yeah.
something that I wasn't expecting to feel. I should say we do want to talk about power differences, but I also want to say, you know, for someone who just made their great escape from prison, I do find it interesting that you're rocking a Rolex.
I slipped it in during the pat down. They didn't notice.
And I wanted to say it to you in the video before someone in the comment section called you out on it, okay? Anyways, we should talk about power delivery. And it's interesting because, you know, high performance, you think of natural aspiration, you think of turbocharging. Nowadays, you think of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
This is supercharged. So there's no turbo lag, which is really cool. It's not quite as immediate as an electric car.
But I think this is way more fun.
Because like you said earlier, it's that sensory explosion. There's so much going on that, and it really does just feel ridiculous. All of that torque hitting you, pushing those rear wheels.
Yeah.
You can feel it kind of waggling a little bit. Really is fun. And then there's all kinds of performance goodies, some extras here that are really cool.
Yeah, I also just wanted to mention the transmission and how impressed I am about how quick it reacts.
It really does kind of predict what you want to do. You give it just a little touch of throttle and it'll automatically downshift because it figures, hey, it's about to take off. Let's, you know, get you into that meaty part of the power band.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Absolutely. But yeah, all of those performance extras, if you want to run through some of that stuff.
Yeah, so it allows you to customize a whole bunch of different stuff, and to a level that I've not really seen in very many cars before. Stuff like your steering, your suspension.
Yeah.
What else you got there?
You can adjust your power, you can adjust the throttle mapping, you can adjust the transmission mapping, you can turn on or off the paddles if you want to. It is really cool.
Right, and all the traction control stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, some of the other cool stuff, there's that chiller, so you can kind of pre-cool the air that you're pumping into the motor. But there's also that kind of post-race cool down mode, so it'll turn the engine off, but it'll keep the fans running. You can pull up, I don't know, dynos and all kinds of different gauges and stuff. And then you really like those intakes up front.
I think they're so cool. Not only do they look cool, but they're also functional. And when those two come together, it's just perfection. And there's that little Easter egg of the Hellcat in there.
I love that so much. It looks so good. And yeah, I agree with you. There's nothing worse than a performance car that has fake vents and all kinds of stuff like that. This one, everything is functional.
Those big old nostrils up there.
They're just pumping all kinds of air into that cone filter under the hood.
And it looks so cool.
It's amazing. This one does really have a lot of presence, but that does come at a price. So I think the red eye starts around 111,000, something like that. And then with all the extras, this one's 126 before tax. The cool thing is the jailbreak package is only like a $1,300 upgrade. So it's basically, I look at it like a tax.
Right.
Dodge goes, oh, you want to get ridiculous with your red eye? Like, it's going to cost you, but we'll let you do whatever you want. You can even get the badges painted different colors if you want to.
Cool.
But here's the only thing that I struggle with at least a little bit. Very different car, but 126 grand could get you a Porsche 911 Carrera.
Wow. Okay, when you put it in that perspective, that seems kind of crazy to me. Although I will say that, like, this is a very different type of performance car. I think this is for people who like putting on a show.
For sure, yeah. And this thing is really that kind of American muscle, even though it's built in Canada.
Woo woo.
We're always going to point that out because it is something of a point of pride for us. But yeah, it is really very much that old school muscle car, whereas the 911 is the total opposite. But if you're just looking at the dollars and cents of it all, that is something worth considering in my mind.
I just love when you do that. But I wanted to mention that this is kind of the Challenger's swan song. So this is the last time it's going to come with a big honking V8. The next versions of these are going to be all electric, right? And so I think that that higher price kind of is justified in a way. Like, this is the last time, this is its final hurrah. It's going to be a very different animal the next time you're going to be able to buy one. So I say, why not?
But it is interesting that it's the last hurrah, but then there is a 2023 called the last call or something
God,
silly.
yeah.
So again, Dodge is really stretching this thing out as far as it can. But one thing is for sure, if you are looking for a big V8 performance, it's hard to beat this. To recap, we like that Dodge is teaching an old dog new tricks with the Jailbreak package and the unique look it offers, as well as just how ridiculous this supercharged Challenger is overall.
We don't like that it's so expensive, although it's easy to see and hear where that money is being spent.
15 years is quite the stretch, but this is anything but a prison sentence. That's how long the Dodge Challenger has been on the market in its current form, and there really isn't much left to say about it, supercharged or otherwise.
It seems that no color is too crazy and no amount of horsepower is too ridiculous as Dodge celebrates what has been a massive success for them over the years. And with this SRT Jailbreak model, it's more of the same, except even more.
I'm not the hero this city needs.